Okay, and then that way I can go live as well.
Team Sharpshoot JC right now is recording this whole segment, so it'll be on YouTube as well. So it's a pleasure to meet with you. I'm excited about this show, Jeremy, and I want to learn more about your story and what you have to share today. So I've introduced myself. So just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I'm actually from a small town in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Swananoa, Black Mountain area in North Carolina. Grew up here, lived here until I went off to the military when I was 17. Grew up as an athlete, wrestling, football, um, baseball, and that kind of led me towards the military because I really understood that um, it wasn't ideal for me in my stature to actually, pursue sports. So I'm a big sports fan. But I grew up, my stepbrother Michael. He's been a big part of my life. My mom, my stepdad, my dad. It was a pretty normal childhood. Growing up and just living with them, and then my two sisters, Cassie and Lisa, so we all kind of lived together. My sister Cassie more with my dad, but my sister Lisa and then my stepbrother Michael, we kind of grew up together. And it was, one of those things to where we didn't have phones, so we were outside playing. So very athletic, just grew up, went to Charlesdale in high school here, war horses, that's where I'm from. So that's kind of just a little bit about me. And uh, yeah, so I'm just excited to be here, excited to be part of this, excited to tell my story because it's helped me, and I've struggled, but I've learned how to deal with things. But I want just everyone to know, that there is a way to, you know, get through things. So that's a little bit about me. I'm 35, born in June, the best month in the world. So
Okay.
that's just a little bit about me.
Excellent, excellent. Similar upbringing. This technology is so new. Well, we actually kind of both grew up in the technology era where we initially, as kids, played outside. We didn't have any phones. We could only use the computer when we were doing projects or homework. So I'm familiar with the
Yeah,
AOL upbringing. Yeah, good.
absolutely.
Good. So you mentioned your story. Before we get into your story, do you have any platforms or any information where people can find out more about who you are or where they can locate you?
I'm mainly on Instagram, and it's jeremy.s.jackson, and then Facebook and Jeremy Jackson. My first name is spelled different, so some people are like, I can't find you. It's Jeremey. So you just find me there. You can, it's public. People can just message me there anytime, I'm available, or through my email, jeremysjackson88 at gmail.com. So that's the main places you'll find me that I respond very quickly. Facebook is probably the best place you're going to find me and the quickest way.
Good, good, excellent, excellent. And before we get into the questions, I do want to thank you for your time and thank you for your service. So, thank you for serving our country and all that you have done for us that we can't even imagine. I do want to thank you.
Thank you.
Good. So, talk to us about your experience. We can begin while you were serving the military on active duty overseas. Just talk to us about what did that look like for you?
It was the military was the thing that I've never really thought about doing until my junior year of high school. A recruiter came in, and they show you a bunch of cool stuff and say, "Hey, this is so awesome." Um, so I entered a delayed entry program. So my junior year, summer after my junior year, I went to basic combat training for the summer. Then I was in the reserves my senior year. I joined the military first duty station at 18 years old, Camp Casey, Korea. So that was a culture shock. The first time I've ever been away from home. So that was pretty unique in its way. And then I went to Fort Bliss after that, and that's where we stood up 6-1 Cav, and we went to Iraq a year later. So we stood it up and then we went to Iraq, and it was a very fast paced deployment. And being 20 years old and in a leadership position in the military, I grew into that in Iraq. And I did have a lot of people that really helped me and guided me.
Mm-hmm.
I know JR, that you've done a podcast with him. He was a big crucial role in Kirkuk, Iraq to me. He's a realist. He's like, you want to get beefed up, I'll get you beefed up, but you better be disciplined. So there was the camaraderie, but the combat side of it was constant. It was every day. Here we wake up and go to work. Here there we woke up and we got our trucks ready, and we went outside the wire for 8 to however many hours. If you got into a conflict, you could be out there for days at a time. So that it being around, I think I was 20 years old when I went to Iraq. I wasn't even legally old enough to drink an alcoholic beverage, but
Mm-hmm.
I could be in Iraq. So it was definitely a culture shock. Part of me, I really liked the pace.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a strong person to be in the combat zone, but I had great leadership around me that kind of took me into this next stage of what my career would later on be. So it was definitely a culture shock. And being from Fort Bliss, and you go from Iraq to Fort Bliss, you're like, it doesn't really, it's the same thing. So when you're landing, you're like, oh, I'm just landed back in the desert. But yeah, it was definitely it was a culture shock, and getting into conflict in my first deployment at 20 years old, and you know getting blown up and having to deal with those things. And um, it was tough. It was extremely tough, but I didn't really understand fully until later in my career what that would have done to me psychologically. But yeah, Kirkuk, Iraq was definitely a big one. A lot of driving around and just kind of poking the bear, I guess you could say.
Oh,
Um, then Afghanistan, I was a senior leader on our team on personal security detail and stuff. And we did more missions that made sense. I was in charge. I was the truck commander for the command sergeant major, so I was in control. I was responsible for his life and everything
okay.
that went with that. And that's a huge role. And I think any leader in the military will tell you, like, any of your soldiers, anything you're responsible for is a heavy burden, and it's something that we don't take lightly, because somebody else's life is in our hands. There was some soldiers from 136 Infantry that got killed in Afghanistan.
Um,
And a lot of my buddies we know, and it's sad that one day you wake up and you're having breakfast with someone, or someone, and then the next day they're gone. Or during the conflict, they get medevaced, and then you go back to have dinner, and they're not there anymore. So it was really, really impactful.
yeah, I can imagine. So mentally, how did you manage going to work day to day and having to deal with people who were losing their lives that you were, close to?
I would say it's a camaraderie in the military. And that's one thing a lot of us struggle with in the civilian world. Like, I knew the person on my left and right would die for me, literally. My best friend in the military, Josh Abel, every day me and him were checking in. He ran his section, I ran my section, and we'd always check in. Sergeant Marisi, all these people play these roles, and just making sure that you're taken care of. So that's kind of how you deal with it. And honestly, you bury it. You just bury it, and then you deal with it later. That's kind of the mindset, because it's so rapid.
Mm-hmm.
You're gone for 10, 12, 15 months, and you're probably outside the wire for 95% of that. But it's checking in and out, and you just check on each other. And we're rough and tough, and we mess around. And the military, you kind of just hold everything back, and you don't talk about it, and you just deal with it. But you would be amazed at the camaraderie that makes you feel settled and makes you feel calm in the military. It's nothing like I've ever seen out here in the civilian world. Yes, I've met people out here that are there for me and do truly care about me. My wife, one, she she learns a lot about my military career. She was not with me during my military career, but she understands like what I went through and just tell my stories. And I think it makes her feel comfortable too, knowing that when I was in those situations, there was somebody that would have died for me, but at the same time, I would have done the same thing for someone else. So that's how mentally you kind of just you deal with it. There are still problems going on at home, but you can't think about that because if I'm sitting there thinking about this, about troubles at home, I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, what the Army paid me to do.
Hmm.
But once again, it goes back to leadership. Great leaders, they took care of us. They checked in with us. It was not what people always see yelling and screaming. And yeah, if you make a mistake, you're going to pay for it, and you learn not to do that again. But they do a good job of checking in with you to make sure, hey, you good? Like
Yeah.
everything that just happened, you good? And that kind of meant a lot to me because I've seen bad leaders and good leaders, but I was fortunate to have probably 90% of great leaders in my military career.
That's amazing to hear. I couldn't imagine having to go to combat. You mentioned something about 6-1 cab. I'm not familiar with that terminology, but I assume is combat. Is that correct?
It's the unit we were assigned to, six squadron, First Cavalry Regiment, First Brigade, First Armor Division.
Okay.
So it was just the unit we were with, and we kind of started that unit up. We built it up. When we arrived there, we didn't, everything was in connexes, and then a year later, we're in Iraq. I mean, that also shows the unit that I was with and how well organized we were, and we were ready for what we were about to go do.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, while you were overseas, I'm sure that had some form of impact on your family. Could you just talk to us about your family life while you were
Yeah,
overseas?
my first deployment, I was married. I got married at a young age. Just one of those young guys just running around, doing things that like, you're like, you're trying to live life. And, it was a bad situation. It was a bad marriage. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's things that happened in that marriage that, during my deployment, I had to bury that stuff. And I was like, well, I'll just deal with it when I get home. And when I got home, it was just, it was terrible. I didn't have that. I didn't have that reunion what most people did. My sister, who I know we'll talk about later on, that passed away. She came down and she would, welcome me home. But the fact that my wife at the time wasn't there, I think that hit even more.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of in my first deployment, a lot of family stuff going on that I just like I can't deal with this. I'll deal with it when I get home.
Mm-hmm.
um, Afghanistan, my second wife that I was married to, everything was fine. We were newer to each other, and we agreed that we weren't going to get married until I come back because my philosophy was I did this mistake once.
Mm-hmm.
Let me make sure that something that we can get through, and then we can build a relationship off of that. And but it's once again, it's tough because there's a lot of stuff going on at home. Home doesn't stop when you're over there.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, when we're gone, their day to day goes, but when we're gone, our day to day goes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's mentally draining, and the time difference. So when you're waking up, they're going to bed. So it's like trying to catch that call, and then when you're trying to make that call, or you're trying to get to the internet and make a quick Skype call, and there's no answer on the end. I mean, you're going to bed and we're like, oh man, this sucks. Or you're going out on mission, wondering what's going on back at home. So it plays with you, but once again, my mindset was I'm here to do a job. I'll deal with it when I get back. I'll deal with it when I'm done. But there was a lot that you just try and unfold, and I didn't know at the time, but I was going to unpack a large punch when I got home.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine it could be very difficult to manage your family life while working overseas, and not only working overseas, you're in combat overseas. So I'm sure a lot of people in the military struggle with that, but nobody talks about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what are some of the challenges that you may have faced while you were overseas in terms of family or just issues in general?
I think my Iraq deployment, I was just so young and I was so driven, and I was like, all right, I wanted to learn everything I could about what I was doing, what was going on in life, like with the military mindset. I really, you know, and I might be at fault on this, but I put the military first. The military was my first obligation, and I wanted to learn. And there was leaders that I looked up to where I'm like, I'm going to be you, but then I'm going to be better. Like that's the way I looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not really. I just always buried it. I dealt with the issue in the sense like, oh man, this sucks, but I'll deal with it. 9, 10, 12 months later. So I didn't. The struggle mainly was just keeping up with the intensity of combat, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
day in day out thing. NFL players, they practice and they might be in pads and they play once a week. These soldiers are strapping on 30 plus pounds, 365 days out in 115-degree weather, getting shot at, getting blown up. That is the most. That's the mind-boggling thing that people do not think about in the perspective of when you look at somebody and you say, like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's like, I know you don't understand, but now you don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that would be the main mental thing. Is just like, oh, here we go again. Putting on your vest. With all your gear. It's just the ground and pound every day. And now that I'm out of the military and have been out for almost 10 years, my
Mm-hmm.
body is paying for that. But um, at the time, I don't think about it. I didn't really think about anything. And in Afghanistan, I was more alert and tentative. And of course, technology and deployments were upgraded,
Mm-hmm.
and more communication with family was available. So it was easier for me to really keep that mindset. I was with great people, great soldiers that have been there, they've done that, they deployed, and we worked together. We were a solid unit, so it didn't really bother me my second time around.
Yeah.
So I was more prepared, and I look back and I think, what are the guys in Vietnam and Desert Storm like? What was their thought process? They didn't have any access to phones, any access to internets. So I always think, yeah, well, my situation was crappy at times.
Mm-hmm.
Theirs was 10 times worse. So I always try and put myself in somebody else's shoes because somebody else has it worse than I did.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what's helping you now recover from all of those experiences? Is there anything in particular that you're doing to help, your mental health to overcome everything that you've seen, experienced, or the trauma that you have dealt with?
Yeah, I kind of, at the time I didn't. When my sister passed away, that's where everything started really spiraling downhill for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my last year of my contract in the military, and I was coming down to the choice of, do I stay, do I go? And to get a call, November of 2013, that, hey, your sister's been murdered. I mean,
Mm.
it's I'm like, man, how do I just get back? I'm 3 months back from Afghanistan and my sister's murdered. So now I'm trying to decompress from a deployment, but now my 22-year-old sister was killed. So that's where everything started going downhill with me, and it was kind of like, I didn't get to deal with that because I still had the military and I still had that mindset. I still have an obligation. I came home, went to the funeral, did all that with my family, and I went back to Fort Bliss. So, I'm from North Carolina. I went back to West Texas, and it kind of just played in the back of my head for a year, and then 2014, August 23rd, I get out of the military. My wife at the time and I, she was pretty much like, you're either out or we're done. And it was kind of a forced decision. At the same time, it's like, all right, I'm dealing with a lot. Let's get out. Let's do something different with the hopes of going into the law enforcement academy, because that's what my stepdad. He's retired from law enforcement. My mom was in law enforcement, so I was like, I'm going to go that route. And
Mhm.
then 1 year later, or 3 months later, after I get out in 2014, we moved to Charleston, and my wife committed suicide.
Oh wow, I'm so
So
sorry that.
that right there, kind of, that's where I took the turn, and at the time I chose alcohol. I smoked and dipped back then. I haven't done that in probably almost 10 years. But I would literally just wake up and drink all day and go to sleep, wake up, drink. And I did that for a while because when she died, I lost everything. I was on my parents' doorsteps with a green army duffel bag, kind of like the movie scenes you see, completely broken. I'm 26 years old, 2 combat tours. My sister was murdered. And now, I was the one that found my wife on the suicide. And, what do you do with that? What do you undo it? And that's where I know we'll get into it. That's where one day I walked downstairs to go get, I drank a 30 pack of beer a day. And I went to
Mm.
get a beer, and my stepdad was in front of the fridge. He's like, "You're either going to go to the VA or I'm gonna take you, willingly or not. You're going." So that's where that was the beginning of my journey to mental health, to helping myself, because I didn't know how to help myself, because everything I did in the military, I buried everything. I
Mhm.
took everything and I buried it and I let it just sit there. So that was kind of the journey to my mental health, and I was not for it. I
Yeah.
was, cussing, screaming. You're going to read a book and you're going to tell me how to fix myself? No. But it was just the small steps in the journey, that accepting the fact that you have a problem, and knowing that you don't have to accept the fact that it's just me. This is what happens. That I think that was the crucial moment when I realized that, and I actually, talked to as a chaplain at the Charleston Police Department. He said, you might want to talk to somebody about everything you've experienced. Right? Tell your story. Tell people what you've been through. And when I started talking about my experiences, I felt better. And that's where that journey kind of started. That journey kind of like, people see the military and they see what they see on the news. Um, People ask you some tough questions about combat sometimes. And my philosophy is, don't ask me a question you don't want a real answer to, because I'm going to be 100% real with you. But that's 2014 is when that journey kind of started. And I had already been in the military for 8 years, seen combat, went through all this stuff. But that's when my mental health started.
That's good that you were able to at least address your mental health. I know some people may go through life and just never, take time to, focus on their mental health, because I feel like that's where a lot of issues arise from, is from your mind, what you're thinking about, what you've absorbed, what you have seen, what you've heard. That all impacts you, and as human beings, we have to be privy to that, and know that just like you work on your physical health, you have to work on your mental health as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that was that is a lot. So we are a spiritual platform. Did you have a relationship with God at that time when you were going through these challenges?
I've always kind of, I believe in God. I believe in that, but I was never deep into that. My grandmother, I mean, she's probably the closest thing to Jesus that I know. And she would always take us to church. Like, you stay with Mama, you're going to church. But we were little, and growing up, I wasn't involved in the churches. And when all the things that happened to my sister and um, my late wife, I kind of stopped believing for a little bit. Like, why do you allow these things to happen to
Mm-hmm.
people? And once again, that's when that chaplain told me, you know, God knew this was going to happen, and He put you in the best possible situation for you to be able to deal with it. And I thought about that for a second. I was like, what if this would have happened in El Paso? Yes, I've got some of my military friends, but I had no family. I had no support system. So it's like God put me in a position to where my parents were around, my brother was around, my sister was around, my grandparents, everything was around me. So when I went down that hole of I can't explain what it feels like, but you don't feel anything. You're like, it's not real. You go to sleep and you wake up and you're like, oh, that's not real, but it is.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I was like, okay, like let's talk about this, because I did. I was like, I questioned God. And since that point, I've started to kind of look at things differently like that. Like, there's a reason for everything that happens. Now, I do believe, God gives you paths to take, and you're going to choose the path.
Mm-hmm.
But he knows already, and I think that really helped me to get back to where I was, because there's people, that are going to listen to this, and they've been through 10 times worse, and they probably don't believe. But that one statement by a chaplain of some man I've never met in my life, that kind of changed the way I was thinking about things. And I don't go to church every single Sunday, but at the same time, I try and look at situations that happen in life. There's things that happen every single day. I'm not perfect, but I try and look at the situation like, okay, what's God's plan for this? Something happens, a vehicle breaks down, um, something happens to your house, like what's the lesson from this? Um, you got to take the lessons and you learn from them, and learn that, like, why did God put me in this situation? Was it to teach me a lesson? Am I not being financially responsible? Am I not? I mean, there's things that you uncover, and I think if you can really get to that, you can start really tapping into your true potential.
Yeah. Of your true purpose. And sometimes God will put you in certain positions where He only wants you to rely on Him for the trauma, for the pain, for night terrors. He wants you to come to Him. So He'll isolate you and remove everything that you thought would comfort you and run to Him for comfort.
Yes,
Yeah.
I totally agree, and it's religious is, these days it's very touchy,
Hmm.
religion, talking about it, you got to be very careful. But at the same time, God wants you to talk about it. God wants you to feel, because this is His way. I think at that point, it's it's you should be able to talk about it. You should be able to do whatever religion you want to do,
Hmm.
vice versa. And so I really think it's important that you be expressful for how you feel and what belief you believe in. And
Hmm.
we have to be respectful of each other, and say, what, I respect your opinion and your religion.
Hmm.
I don't have to agree with it, but I respect it, and I'm not going to talk bad about what you do. I just ask for the same thing in return. And I
Right.
really think that as a society, we need to get back to that.
Yes. Someone put on the live, it's time to be bold for Christ. And I think just being silent about, your story or your belief in Christ is what the enemy wants you to do. He wants you to hold it all in, and that will eat you up inside. So I hope society comes to a common ground where everyone is bold about their faith and what they've dealt with, because you never know who you're going to help. So just speaking out on your belief and speaking out on your story is what you're called to do.
Yeah, and I truly think that, like, a lot of people will I'm not for fame. I eventually want to get into writing a book.
Hmm.
I've wrote many chapters and I'm putting them together. But like, I just want to save one person. If it's one person that sits there and says, you know what, I'm not going to kill myself, I'm going to get help. That's all I care about. I just care about somebody, just something I say in today. I hope that somebody is struggling with and says, you know what, if he can do it, I can do it. And
Yes.
I'm not saying I'm the strongest man in the world, but from my situation, I feel like, if I can get over this, you can get over things. And suicide awareness is a big thing in the military. But just one person, I can. If it's one soldier, I'm doing my part.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, you're planting a seed, and you're not responsible for who waters that seed, but just planting that seed is definitely going to be fruit for someone else. So that's all we can do. We can't change the world, we can't, always change our environment, but we can also kind of just change our perspective or change our minds on how we look at things. And your brother mentioned you can get through a lot of battles since you was young, I'm assuming. So you're one of those people that
Yeah,
are.
my brother,
Go ahead.
yeah, my brother, like he, every day with my brother, I talk to him every day. We communicate back and forth, and he just, he's, if I called him right now and said, hey, I need an issue, he lives in South Carolina. He's going to be here. So um, he's kind of looked up to me as a bigger brother, but I've kind of looked up to him as a little brother. And he's my stepbrother. He's not even my, you know, um, real blood, but I've known him since he was, I think, 3 years old, 3, 4. Michael, I know you're watching, so you can kind of clarify on that. Um, but it's important to have that in your life, and I think growing up and us just being so close. So yeah, my brother, big role in him. We were just talking 20 minutes before this podcast was going on. So uh, it awesome, awesome dude, and it's important to have that in your life. And if you don't have that, you look outside of that and
Mhm.
find somebody. But yeah, my brother, he's one of my biggest supporters.
That's amazing. Yeah, you said you was a U.S. Army Ranger. So I said
Yeah,
Ranger, but I wasn't familiar with the terms. But it's so good to have someone in your corner, especially a brother or a sister that's always supporting you. You don't realize how much, that impacts your mental health as well. Just having someone on your side that's been with you through life and has experienced those life challenges with you. Just having them as a listening ear can help you get through so much in life.
yeah. And it's once again, it's sometimes you just listen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he does that very well. I can be chatty. I can talk your ear off. I can sit here all day and talk to you. But just having a listening ear
Yeah.
sometimes, that's what you need. And sometimes you find yourself rambling, but then it's like, okay. But then my brother's always been that kind of where he'll repeat it back to me. My wife does the same thing. I have this huge support system now that it's incredible.
That's good. Many people don't have that. That's a blessing to have, such a close knit support system that will always support you no matter what you do. That is so important. I think a lot of people don't realize, in life you can have cars, you can have houses, but when you have like real love and people who support you, that is very rare and it's a gift from God.
Absolutely.
Good. So, wanted to just kind of touch bases on the importance of God and what are some tips when it comes to overcoming depressions or suicide or lack of motivation.
One, I think the biggest thing is you have to accept that there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of veterans get out, and if you don't retire from the military, the getting out of the military is more like, okay, here's your DD 214, here's your honorable discharge.
Mm-hmm.
Take this to your S1, see ya, and you're dropped, and you're kind of like, oh. Then you get in the civilian world, and you think they're the dumbest people in the world because you've been living this bubble lifestyle of discipline and fitness and everything every single day. Um, it's a lifestyle, and then now you're going into a different lifestyle, and you have to accept that there's issues. When somebody's saying, hey, you're not right, that doesn't make sense to me. And then your first instinct is like, yeah, because what do you know about life? But you have to accept that they live a different life than you lived, and you have to come to the conclusion of, hey, all right, there's some issues here. So I think accepting that there's issues and being okay that knowing that you have issues and can seek help, that is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't do that, that's really the first step. You got to accept it and then say, hey, it's okay to get help. Because military people were like, hey, no, we're good, we're all right, we're fine. And then you might get in and something bad happened to you in life, and you get to drinking, and then you make this stupid decision off of a drunk thought. And so that's where, I was fortunate enough to go get that help and, be able to understand that, like, hey, God isn't bad, but I'm taking the path He doesn't want me to go down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so really just accepting, you got to accept that there's issues and deal with them, because if you don't deal with your demons, you're going to get so deep that you can't dig yourself out of. So that was really the tip, is just accept it. I encourage every veteran when you get out, whether you think you need it or not, go to your VA, start seeing help, start talking about your issues that you've had in the military. Because even though you didn't go to combat, I mean, there's things that may have happened to you while you're in the military that are just, to you, they're big deals. And I'm not the one to tell somebody that, your issues are not real issues. So that would be my tip. Like, start there, and you will unlock a huge power that you don't even know is there. That you just feel like you're so shut in. You got to go talk about it.
Yeah. Excellent. That is key. Just making sure you're talking about it, you're seeking help, and getting guidance on it is important. Uh, you also mentioned your father played a key role in your life. Um, could you kind of just describe your relationship on who he was and how he's helped you get to where you are now?
Yeah, well, it was my stepfather mainly. My father was kind of out of my life a little bit for a while, and when that happens, you always crave that fatherly relationship. And I'm not saying everything was great growing up, and it was a perfect childhood. He was in the military. He was in the Coast Guard, and it was, you clean your room, you make your bed, you have chores. You don't do them, there's consequences,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's very structured. And it made me understand. I was so angry when I was a kid and a teenager because I'm like, this is stupid. Like, why am I doing this? But when I went into basic training, everything clicked. It made sense.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, okay, well, this is like, I know how to make a bed. I know, like, you'd be amazed how many people don't even know how to make a bed when they arrive at basic training. But that structure, and, he was hard on us. But, if we played football, we played football. You don't quit. You
Mm-hmm.
play football. You wrestle. I wasn't tall enough to play basketball, but, you choose that, then that's what you do. You don't quit. And then if you do quit, then you know what? You're not doing this no more.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard on us kids, and we didn't understand at the time, because we're like, why are you going to be like this? These other kids are going out and they go do fun things, and we snuck around and did stuff, and but I'm pretty sure they knew what we were doing,
Yeah.
and it grew into me, the soldier that I became, because it was like, hey, I didn't struggle through basic combat training. It sucked at the time because I wasn't used to that style of training, but I didn't struggle as much because I knew to keep my mouth shut, do what I'm told to do, and do it to the best of my ability. And that kind of set the tone for my military career. So things are always bumpy in life, but you have to recognize, there's some things that I learned from my real father. There's
Mm-hmm.
some things I learned not to do. So you just have to, like, pick and choose what you take from them. But it's amazing how when you grow up and then something happens in your life, and, oh man, they tried to tell me that when I was 13, and I was just mad at them.
Yeah.
So that's where that kind of built. They noticed the difference in me when they came to my graduation. They noticed that, like, all right, like, you're not a boy anymore. Like, you're a man, and so it was eye opening to me.
Excellent. Good. Yes. You just don't realize how certain adults play a key role in your childhood that helps shape your future. So, just wanted to um, recognize your stepfather. I know you mentioned it on our first conversation, and it gives us a good understanding on how you became who you are. Good. So,
Absolutely.
recently had some people who have joined. I'm interviewing Jeremy Jackson. This recording will be available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. So you'll be able to watch the entire segment. We will also have the recording clips on Instagram as well for you to view. So,
Awesome.
Jeremy, is there any closing remarks regarding how people can find you or contact you for any additional information?
First, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for having me on here. Uh, I've watched your interviews with other people, and it's awesome what you're doing. I love the message that you're spreading. I love the platform that you're doing to that.
Thank you.
Thanks to I call him Sergeant Mac, but Jr. Sergeant Mac. That what he's doing with Right Hand of God right now and building the team. I've got text messages shooting off right now of everything going on. He's getting everything set up. I really appreciate that. My wife Crystal, she plays a huge role in my life, and while she wasn't there for my military, she's here for me now, and it's like this was God's reason for putting me with her. So I want to shout to her that I love her, and
Oh,
um, the job that I'm at now, I've been in the federal government for 15 years total, and I decided to step away from that. And now I work with a great company, Parameter Generation and Control, small family-owned company. But they are great people. They're great to me. They gave me a great opportunity to work there. So I want to, shout out to them. My brother, Michael, for all the support he's given me, him and his wife, Leah. My sister, Cassie, she deals with a lot of things too, from our sister dying, my
mhm.
mother, Peggy, my stepdad, John, just a lot of people I want to thank. And it's too many people to say, but everybody that's been a part of my life, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate you listening to me. Josh Abel, my best friend, Casey Carter, one of my best friends in the civilian world. Thank you. Find me on Instagram. Find me on Facebook. Make sure you spell my first name right, Jeremey. And if you want to be more personal on the contact, just shoot me a message. I'll shoot you over my cell phone. You can text me. Any veteran that needs help, reach out to me. I've got great resources. Put them in contact with you. Maybe they get on your podcast and they tell their story. Put them in touch with Sergeant Mac. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate it. And I'm thankful for you, thankful for God, and thankful for everybody in my life.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Yes, I'm. It's been a pleasure to interview you. Your story is amazing. It will change the lives of so many people. So I'm hoping to do this again. And if you are listening or watching, you would like to share your story, you can email me at universalmindshift@outlook.com. Well, thank you so much. You really, made an impact today. I want you to know that this is a great interview, great story, and I'm just looking forward to just seeing what the future has for you and helping other veterans seek help when it comes to their mental health.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. You have a wonderful evening.
You as well.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. That was awesome.
It was. It was. So